What's up? What's up? Hi guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. I'm back. Apologies for such a long period without any videos. It's getting busy here in Scotland, so yeah, not as many videos. Anyways, I've got an exciting one for you today. I'm joining a CareCollab video with loads of many channels. They're all gonna come up on the screen, so you can see who else is participating in this one. So if you're new to CareCollabs and this is the first video you're seeing, I'll explain to you what it is. But if this is, your not first video, you know exactly what's going on. I've got timestamps in the description below, so feel free to jump straight to my care section of this video. But if you're new and you're kind of thinking, what is this CareCollab all about? I'll give you a very quick kind of description. So basically, there is a lot of other orchid channels on YouTube who have the same orchid, and we post a video on the same day how we care for that orchid in our climate, in our countries, and in our kind of setups. And the idea is to give you as much information about the orchid as possible and basically show you that you can grow the same plant in different ways, and how the plant is kind of progressing. So I am based in the UK, in Scotland, so quite far north, so definitely not a good climate for orchids, for tropical orchids. So I grow my orchids inside in my spare bedroom. I have a shelf where I keep all my plants. You can see here basically how I've got it set up. It's got lights, it's got fans, and I'm kind of, trying to regulate the environment that way. And this plant, which is Vanda falcata, or it used to be called Phoenicia falcata, I've got it under highlight, really the highest light I can give it. It's actually sitting in a community pot with a cattleya, which is a teeny tiny cattleya seedling. So I put them together, and yeah, so that's basically my kind of main setup. So I'll show you this plant up close. So it's sitting on this side of the pot. This one is called Gojo fukurin variety, and you can see it's got variegated leaves. It's very, very pretty. And it's got two fans, so this one here and this one there, and then this little cattleya sits over here, so try to ignore it. But basically this just shows orchids can grow together. There is a lot of, I think, kind of misconceptions. You can't grow orchids in the same pot, etc., but it is possible, as long as they're healthy plants and they can't kind of contaminate each other with any kind of viruses and diseases. You will be absolutely fine growing plants together. And this just helps me to water one less pot because I've got two plants in one pot. But anyway, this one is growing really well. I've done a video about it a while ago, which was also a CareCollab, by the way, and I basically had one main fan, which is this one here. And then the fan at the back, this was a teeny tiny fan, but now it feels like it's actually becoming a main fan because it's so big. I keep looking to see if it's gonna give me a third fan, but no luck, unfortunately. Mine hasn't bloomed either, so I'm still waiting for that. But this orchid was kind of struggling for a little bit, a few kind of periods, a few times, so it seems to be happy now. So the way I've got it planted in here is I've got this 9 centimeter pot, and it's got a fairly kind of chunky bark. But for the size of a plant, you know, it's chunky, but it's kind of medium bark. And here, I'll try and lift it very, very carefully to show you what is underneath. So you see there is a few roots hanging outside of the pot underneath, and they're kind of dripping with water. And the reason for that is there is some microfiber here in the pot. I'll try not to make a massive mess on the floor. But in here, I've got some leca at the bottom, and there is some water in there as well. And I mean, when I potted the plants, the roots were not like that. The roots were actually, I had quite a poor root system at that point. And now it's growing so many roots. It's a bit difficult to say which roots are for which plant. But I have a feeling that this is maybe a Cattleya root, whereas this is maybe a Neophoenicia root, but I'm not 100% sure because the roots are just kind of going everywhere. You can see some roots here. These are Neophoenicia roots. You can see they're coming out of Neophoenicia. But my Cattleya here was basically rootless as well. And as soon as I potted them up together, they both seem to have like really kind of rejuvenated themselves with the amount of roots that they've kind of thrown out. So it's actually getting difficult to understand which root is for which plant. But they're both rooted in, they're both like really solid in the pot. So I know they're both doing well here. So this decorative pot here, I put the leca at the bottom mainly because if I plug this pot to the very bottom, then my Neophoenicia, you know, it would basically, it would hit the edges of the pot and it wouldn't fit inside the pot because it's kind of, you know, it's got these fans quite wide. So that's why I put leca to the bottom of this pot so that my inner pot sits closer, you see, to the top of this decorative pot. So I needed something in here to kind of hold this pot upright, upwards, kind of closer to the top. And when I watered the spot, there is just water kind of left in this decorative pot, and then I started noticing that all these roots are starting to grow inside, kind of underneath the pot. So I'm now having a really hard time trying to make sure I don't damage those roots underneath. So I very rarely take this inner pot out of the decorative pot because, you know, I don't want to damage the roots that are now kind of growing outside of the main pot and is kind of underneath. So I'm gonna have a really hard time trying to repot this at some point. But I repotted this fairly recently, and you know, as I say, they were both kind of didn't have really good root systems, and they seem to be rooting in really nice. So I think I was still gonna have at least a year and a half, if not longer, for them to be able to sit in the spot, so I won't have to repot it for a while. And hopefully, you know, these roots are gonna grow even better, and I'll have a better, bigger root systems. But a lot of people as well are kind of a bit concerned about keeping a lot of water in the pot. And you know, this is organic media. I've got bark in this inner pot, but I do have a thin layer of leca inside of this pot at the bottom. So if I fill the water a bit too much, I don't want the bark to be sitting in water because it will start rotting quicker and, you know, kind of disintegrate quicker. Whereas leca is inorganic, so it can easily sit in water, and you know, it's not going to kind of release any acids or anything like that. And you know, these roots are now basically sitting in water all the time, the ones that are kind of growing here at the bottom, and that is totally fine. You know, I didn't kind of put them in water for them to adapt to this method at all. You know, they've grown straight into water themselves, and you could see that the root tips are still active, so they're still growing, and this is the only kind of environment that they know, and they obviously like it. You know, they can very easily turn around and start growing back up out of the water, you know, into the air. You know, there's plenty of space for them to do so. So, you know, they can do what they want, but looks like they're actually enjoying that water layer at the bottom. And it means as well that the inside of the pod doesn't fully dry out ever, and these roots always have access to water. In terms of feeding it, I'm not really feeding them very frequently, so I would feed them at most once a week, and I give it around 160 to 200 parts per million of a Cairness orchid food. I can't remember what it's called exactly, but I'll put the name of it on the screen for you if you're interested. So I basically feed my orchids once a week, but when I go through all my orchids with the sprayer, if the orchid still has water, I just skip it, I don't water it again. So it means that the food might be skipped as well. So it means that maybe it gets fed once every 2 weeks. And so far so good. The orchids seem nice and healthy, and they're totally kind of happy with that. And I try not to overfeed them, especially smaller orchids like that. Vanda falcata, it is a species orchid. This is Cattleya schilleriana, which is also a species, and it's a seedling. So they really don't need, very high feed to be able to grow. They're still tiny plants, and they seem to be growing well so far. I mean, in terms of temperatures, it's quite difficult for me to comment on that because my temperatures at the moment are around 20 to maybe 20, 25 degrees Celsius. And, at night it might maybe fall down to maybe 18 degrees. So it's a fairly consistent temperature across. And because I grow it at home, in my spare bedroom, I can't really give it very big differences in temperature. But saying that, it's growing just fine, but it's not blooming, and potentially could grow even better. So I'm not saying that my environment is the best for this particular orchid. In terms of humidity, I have around 55 to 70% humidity. Again, quite consistent across day or night or summer or winter. It's just quite consistent across the whole kind of season. But again, maybe that is the reason why it doesn't bloom. So it grows well in my environment and it's quite consistent, but maybe that is the problem and that's why it's not blooming. So it's quite difficult for me to give you the care for the orchid because I feel like my orchid is not at its best, because it hasn't bloomed. So it's difficult for me to say that this is the right way to kind of grow this orchid. But apart from that, it's not a fussy orchid, you know what I mean? It doesn't rot, not for me at least. I'm not like watering it all over the place to give it a chance to rot, but other orchids are so sensitive to it. Even if they get water anywhere near them, they start rotting. This one never had a problem like that. It doesn't rot. It doesn't seem to be too fussed about the media, or if I water it too often, for example, there's still water inside the pot, it doesn't seem to mind that at all. So I feel like it's quite a laid back orchid, fairly easy to grow. But maybe my consistent environment is the reason why it's growing so easily. And for other people or other environments, it might not be as easy to achieve that and to make this orchid grow kind of consistently. So hopefully that's why this CareCollab is so great, is to see how other people grow this orchid and what kind of environments they have, and to see how the plant is doing. And hopefully out of all these videos and all these kind of environments, you can make a conclusion on what is the best environment and setup for the orchid. So we're all learning here, we're all trying to make them happy, to get them to bloom, etc. So I hope we'll have some people with this orchid in bloom even, and they can show us exactly what they've done and how they made them bloom, and how they kind of keep them happy. So I guess that is pretty much my take on this orchid. As I say, I love it. It's a miniature plant, especially this particular one, this Gojo fukurin variety. It's a miniature orchid, grows fairly slow, but it's very pretty. And you can see I'm not growing it in a traditional setup, which would be kind of a moss base or moss, ball, that kind of the roots of this orchid would go around. So my setup is totally different. There is not a little bit of moss in here, but it's still growing well. So, and I can't really grow plants in moss, to be honest. So, this actually, it works better for me, which means it's gonna work better for the orchid because I can look after it better. So I hope it's given you something new, a version of how to grow this orchid, and I hope you enjoyed my video. If you have time and if you're interested, please go and check other channels' videos, to see how they're growing this orchid. And I hope you can see some blooms as well across the board. So yeah, I will also link my last video of this orchid at the end of this video. If you're interested to see what it did previously in the previous CareCollab, feel free to jump on that so you can see the progress of my plant. But that is it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up for me. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. As I say, I'm not posting too many videos lately, but we'll see how it goes. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.